Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Be My Own Boss podcast, episode number 10. And before a couple things before I introduce Mike here, but number one, remember this is the last one. After this, guys, we will be live on both channels, so it's time to subscribe if you haven't to the other channel. You got to subscribe to the Be My Own Boss podcast channel, because after we're done with every live we do on Monday, they will always be up over there. The other ones on this side will be put onto the members page, and I will put a community post up leading you guys to that one because we want to build up that channel. So if you are watching on the replay, make sure that you're watching over there. Also, I put up a community poll in the chat asking you guys, because those of you who have been watching, you know that we titled this, that we're on part 2 of a part 6 series, and we already titled it The Boston Massacre. So after this last weekend and the events that took place, the poll is saying, do you guys think that we should change that name? Both Mike and I are kind of torn on this because it was a great name for what we're doing, but both of us can also see why it might not be great at this time to continue with that. And we also don't want to appear clickbaity because there's a lot of people putting out that kind of stuff in titles right now where it just doesn't belong. So anyway, thank you for joining us. And host here, Mr. Mike Hruby.
Thank you, Steve.
And Mike, welcome. And so last week our title was, because we covered it in full, what was the title for last week's?
The Boston Massacre. Good question.
I mean, I know what we covered. I'm just trying to think.
Just how
I caught us off guard.
First one is ABC Boston, just the Boston Massacre 2004.
Yeah.
Uber and Lyft. Yeah. And then this one was ABC, goes into the anatomy.
So right, and this one also, what was the other title that what we had that you came up with?
This was the murder weapon.
Murder weapon.
This is how they do it, and that's true. I mean, they're trying to kill careers.
Yeah,
completely. So
yeah. So welcome, Traveler. Welcome, Kevin Hawthorne. Welcome, Jose. I see you guys jumping in here. I see some others lingering and looming. Feel free to jump into the conversation, please.
Hi, guys.
And welcome. So, Mike, the murder weapon. A quick story of what we talked about last week was, it was kind of the effect, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a good way to put it. And now we're going to talk about the cause.
Specific mechanics. How did the state set up something that trapped companies those big and those sophisticated into being guilty of something? What I hear, Steve, is that people say Uber and Lyft must be really guilty of something terrible to have to pay a fine that big. I mean, you could literally blow up on a nuclear reactor, in operation, and in the power grid, and they wouldn't fine you that much. So
I know there's some veterans out there listening and watching right now. I see some of you in the chat. What do you guys think? I was asking Mike about this. Do you think Uber will pay this $175 million? They do have until January 1st, I believe.
Yes.
So I was saying to Mike, I feel like that's a long time to give Uber to wiggle out of something, even if it is you must pay it. I feel like that's to me, I would say you have to pay me I'd make a judge and my lawyer and everybody say, make it tomorrow, because otherwise I don't trust them. I mean, that January date's just so far out. There's just so much time to go,
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I guess, like you said, it's a judgment. It's separate of everything else, but I still they do things that we've never seen other companies do before, and they're global, and they have a lot of wiggle room, and they have a lot of power too, because they can leave. And I guess we'll get into that. So I guess let's properly use this time and jump in, because there's a lot to cover today, right?
Yeah, there is, but it's all something. It's something that everybody can grasp, and they need to, because this is the weapon that is designed specifically to end their careers. These are career killers. I've been through this with the Sarbanes-Oxley Act in my own business 20 years ago. Guys, it is murder. Let me tell you, when they take your business from you, you don't have a backup, and you don't have a backup after that. So how does this work? And so we thought today we would talk about the ABC law. I'm calling it ABC labor law. It's not really a test. It's more of a trap, but that we're going to talk about that trap part next week. But the ABC law works.
Well, and let me just interject to everybody before you jump in, because again, guys, if you're thinking, oh, they're talking about that ABC Massachusetts thing again, this ABC can exist anywhere. We said it last week. I think it's probably good that we say it every week, because
it's coming.
Don't think we're just talking about Massachusetts. This can easily relate to your state.
The plan is to bring it into all states, and they're starting with the blue states because they can waltz it in under cover of night very quickly. But it's their plan that it's going to, one way or another, it's going to be national law, and you're going to have to deal with it, which means you're going to have to do something else with your life. So the foundation of this law is a trick. It says that all individuals who are working in services are employees. Now, that's false, and it's just not true.
Yeah.
And yet that's the assumption in law. I mean, it's written. Mm-hmm. It's not a maybe. That is the law in Massachusetts, 90 words. And it's really false in 2024 because almost half the country, 40 plus, makes some sort of income working as, independently, contracting for work. Lots of things. There's over 600 occupations we've counted that you can, and people are contracting. So by setting up and saying that something exists, the defendant, which is like Uber and Lyft in these cases, has to prove a negative. You have to prove that they're not an employee. And of course, I think everybody knows you can't actually prove a negative because there's always one more thing that could be brought up. So Uber and Lyft and basically a stand-in for all businesses and individuals who use independent contractors have to prove that they're not employees. And the ABC test gives them a little test. Okay.
So should we relate this to the federal one where it's because like the ABC in California was just point blank, you're all done. But the federal one is very elusive. It's like you could have you and I could both be Uber drivers, go into the room one at a time and have different results.
That might be, but to my knowledge, California took ours, and I think they put in a person instead of an individual or the worker. And there's a reason for that. That's a trick too. And then the PRO Act took California's and repeated it. Some of the newer states that are trying to put this in, the blue states, they are also using the Massachusetts wording. So that we're going to go over that because it's so clear. And, when you think about it, and anybody can understand this, but nobody takes the time because they figure that they do understand it. And I'm saying Uber and Lyft got caught with this, not that they're doing something bad, but they're doing something that had a long tail and a huge penalty attached to that tail. So the ABC word, the meaning of it is that there are three prongs like a fork. There's a left, the middle, and the right of a fork. And each one of these is talked about in sort of a verbal shorthand. And the shorthand, I could, for the people on Spotify, I can say that it's pretty easy to follow. The first prong A, talks about something called freedom of direction and control. Free of direction and control. And then, so that's you can't control, you can't direct. I'm not sure what's the difference, but okay, fine. You can't be a busybody and act like a boss and pass this test. Okay, then there's an and. Now, when you get to law, every word counts. Same with a patent. When you get every word counts. So after the A test, we're going to add what comes later, and that's the B test. And this is where the action is. B test, the short phrase is you got to be working outside the usual course of the business. Okay.
And this is the killer.
This is the likely, but they didn't say, likely is the killer for almost all Massachusetts victims, like, who are employers.
Mhm.
So we're gonna come back and break that one down. Then there's another and. So this is a triple test, but they add them. It's not like if you can pass one, you can add it.
Well,
You,
Mike,
you
wouldn't you add to the fact that every driver is being hurt by the B test too? When you said that the employers are being affected, but every driver is too.
Yes, right. But
I mean,
the
okay.
law studiously ignores the drivers. It uses them like we're analyzing these little pawns on the board. They're not human beings. They don't have wishes. They don't have volition. They don't have ambition. They're just like a little plug-in thing that works on an assembly line, and we're going to deal with them that way. They never get to speak in this. No one can speak out in the regulatory process enforcing this law. If you're a seller, no, we'll decide what your relationship is with your boss, not your relationship with yourself or with your work. Okay.
But you even just said it, with your boss, which till
Yes.
now isn't the case. They're not your
Right.
boss.
And then
so do you have to be hired first now too?
well, they're looking at the penalty part is entirely retro. No, none of them were hired. That's
right.
they were never asked to be employees, and they don't want to be that by and large. So then there's an and. So we're still adding stuff up. And then we've got this third provision, which is shorthand phrases, customarily engaged. And the first thing you thought of, you'll think of is, what is customarily and what is engaged? Like if I work a little bit now and then, am I engaged? And what is customarily? Is it okay to moonlight? And what does that mean? And then there are more words, but customarily engaged is the shorthand for the third prong. So that's the three things. So you think, okay, I sort of understand those. Let's just go do the work, and we'll figure it out later. There won't be any problem because I'm voluntarily working, and the client knows I'm voluntarily working. Okay, that's all set. It's at this point that I think long ago, Uber and Lyft got caught, and they weren't doing anything. I think they got caught not completely understanding the difficulty they were in already in Massachusetts. Complete speculation. It's not in the agreement. It's not in the news releases. They'll never tell either of us, you, me, or our audience. They'll never tell us what actually happened. But you have to guess. You have to use your best business judgment about what's going on here. So if we break down each of these prongs, yeah, I know. If it weren't so terrible, it'd be a riot. The first prong, right, which is one test, is actually 4 undefined phrases, and you have to pass all of them. And I can say these very quickly. Most of you will remember them. Free of direction. That means, I guess, that they can't tell you how to do the job. Free of control, like they can't tell you to come and do it at 10 o'clock in the evening because we've got a flood and you got to do this right now. And then, so those two things under the contract has to provide it. Lots of work is done without a contract. It shouldn't be, but maybe it is. Maybe you just had a regular contract. Anyway, under the contract. So they're going to look at the wording that protects it. And then here's the magic in this one. In fact. So not only are they going to look at the contract, they're going to make sure that you have none of these things. In fact, this is a purity test, and nobody passes purity tests. You just can't.
No, I'm already thinking of stupid things where they've already had control that they're removing them even more. Like, okay, do I want to use Waze, Google Maps, or Apple Maps to get Mike to the airport doing rideshare?
Right.
And which way is correct?
Right. And if I use
like, which one are they using so that I don't use it, so that I'm not under the control of what I don't know.
Yeah, it'll drive you nuts. Yeah, literally, this is like a drain, and you just go down it, and there is no up. It's just, but you have to understand this. It's important for independent contractors to understand this weapon, because in the long run, we've got to get rid of it as it affects us. We can leave it in place, but we can get around it. And that's what we're here talking about today. We're eventually going to get around this. Let's go to prong B. We've got 2 phrases. Now we've got 4 phrases in a 3-part test, okay, that you have to pass. And they're undefined. They don't have any particular meaning. The fun thing is the 2 undefined phrases in prong B, which use the same word twice. Like, how the hell? Well, let's study it. Let's plunge in. The first phrase that's undefined is the usual course of business. This is not what people talk about in business. What's the usual course of business? Like, no, business is a problem. Any business is a problem-solving machine, and they don't talk about it. They just like, what's the problem? How can we solve it? Let's move on because, we're going that direction. Then the second phrase is the business of the employer. And they use the word business twice, but it has 2 test meanings. All right. Now, let's take these in reverse order because the first phrase modifies the second, the business of the employer. I can guarantee you business spends billions of dollars every year in aggregate trying to figure out what their main business is because they need to tell their investors, they need to make investments, they need to focus their corporate skills, they need all their people to giving all their attention to our main business, and then they get rid of everything else. And a lot of that everything else is what they seek independent contractors for, is they don't want to train people, they don't want to hire them, they don't want to send them on vacation, they don't want to have this giant apparatus of a couple of buildings worth of people they would rather not have. They just don't want them. And that's where one of the reasons independent contracting has grown. It's outside what the business wants to focus on. So that's the background. So anything in this prong that Uber and Lyft are, guilty of to the Labor Department of Massachusetts, that's not acceptable. You can't, okay.
This is why Uber used to love that classification wherever they could get it of, we're a tech company. Then they just kind of abandoned it, even like, we're just a dispatch company for rideshare. But I was like, when they abandoned it, I was like, why'd you abandon it? Because I know you're not a tech company, but at least it was helping you get around some of the things.
I actually think they're a matching company and that's software, but doesn't matter what I think. Okay. Right. The modifying phrase is the usual course of business. This is nutty. There is nothing like the usual course of business. First of all, there are emergencies all the time of every possible, sort. Your roof falls in because of snow load. There's a flood. People don't come to work. Your supplier burns down. I mean, there's just an unending list of emergencies. And when you have to, you reach for an independent contractor. You don't want to hire somebody. Maybe 3 of your people are out on maternity leave. They're coming back. So you get independent contractors to fill it in. Is that usual? It fails. This test fails all emergency work. It fails seasonal work. It fails cyclical, because whatever you guess is outside the usual course of business, they're going to guess is inside it because the Department of Labor is trying to fail you. That's what they're supposed to do with the ABC test. All right. So now we're done basically we've got 6 tests so far. And we come to prong 3, which is a little friendlier ground, but kind of vague. There's a reason that it's a little friendlier ground, and we can go into that next week when we look at how this thing became a trap. But the 3 phrases are customarily engaged, okay, and then an independently established, and they're referring then to, and then there are 4 words that talk about a trade, a profession, an occupation, or a business. And in 13 years of studying this, I realized those things are like a freebie. Almost anything you do for money, I've never thought of an exception, is one of those 3. It's like a trade, like craft, carpentry, all the construction, an occupation, that's a statistical category.
So if you were to ask a lawmaker in Massachusetts right now, if you went up to one and you happened to have a moment and said, what does customarily mean?
Oh, they wouldn't know.
I mean, would they just not even answer you because they know that you're referring to some legislation and they know that, well, we can't define that for you.
The only people that would know about it would be the labor and something else committee.
But would they give an answer?
Oh, probably not. They don't want to be pinned down on it. And they don't study it. They study the 6,000 bills that come in every year to see if they should act on them.
Because when you say that word, I start thinking about all the people multi-apping who are doing rideshare, delivery, grocery shopping,
Right.
last mile courier. So no, they're not customarily in rideshare. They're all over the place.
Right. But they're to your and my mind, they're customarily engaged what they're doing. They're
Platform engaged. They're customarily platform engaged.
they're involved. Right. They get in their car and they do stuff. They pick up passengers, drop them off, so they tend to follow that, except that this prong prohibits brand new work. The first job is illegal because you're not customarily. And before that ride, you're not, you did something else, whatever it was. Maybe you didn't even work at all, but you're not customarily. After that, it gets easier. Then independently established. This is normally what the law would suggest there if we weren't trying to screw everybody who buys from us. Independently established means it's not a division of the corporation. It's established in some way by it's an LLC or has a corporate form, or I fill out a Form C. I mean, there's some way that separates it from just picking up somebody down the street, charging them $20 for gas, and driving them to Logan Airport. It's different than that. And then finally, the third one is of the same nature as the service performed. All right, now this is ridiculous, because in small business, which all the drivers have and all independent contractors have, you are always looking for what are called adjacencies, something that's like what I do that I can learn and then I can sell to my existing customers or a new, very similar market that I can reach easily. Always. That's the whole thing of the businesses find new markets, and it is completely normal. And here it's you're forcing that to be forcing them to have to pass that test. Well, if you're a landscaper and the guy says, can you, we have a nice summer relationship. How about the winter? I need you to plow my driveway. Here the state is threatening to get in there and say, that's not the same nature. Landscaping is stuff you do, with the ground, and snow is what falls on the ground. It's water and it runs away eventually. So you don't know it. Any service expansion is going to fail this. First jobs fail it. And any emergency response is like, hey, I know you're a pediatric nurse, but we've got a whole bunch of, people, geriatric patients. Can you cover them? Because they're all homeless at the moment. And can you take care of them and their medical needs while we find them housing? Perfect example of where you get an independent contractor to do, nurse to do something very similar under difficult circumstances. All right. So we're done with that. That's 9 different tests. And the 9 tests that's going to be applied to every nurse that comes in, working in emergency, and you cannot tell when you're just trying to get the job done for the buyer. So somewhere in there is what really captured the Massachusetts Department of Labor's attention. They said, we can find these guys. And they were giddy and they had office parties. And they said, we're going to get them. I guarantee you, this is not impartial judges wearing wigs and following British law for the last 300 years. These are people like the Attorney General. She is already, I have a little
Andrea Campbell, yeah.
Andrea Campbell. She's already bragging. A.G. Campbell secures $175 million settlement from Uber and Lyft. This is how people run for governor in Massachusetts. If you're got a ceiling over you for Attorney General of the state, that really helps your career path. This is why she's in this job, is so she can run for state governor. Okay, so the real killer here that really got things going for Uber and Lyft, the reason they didn't settle sooner, is treble damages. The state took every driver they could. They demanded the information from Uber and Lyft. They found out how much they made, and they added up what their pay should have been if they were subject to minimum wage and overtime and all this other stuff, and added all the benefits they could possibly imagine. the same list of 6 benefits that they got crushed with, and tripled all of that. And that was the first ask. Campbell's little munchkins over there in labor law enforcement. That's how this works. They said, we need to talk. They probably issued a subpoena, and we think you're guilty of, and I'm picking a number, but I think it's triple that for various reasons. We think you're responsible for $850 million worth of accumulated fines, benefits, and penalties. And Uber and Lyft absolutely quacked. Like, oh my God, you got to be kidding me. No, here it is. So we're going to haul you into court. And they had negotiations and they had discussions, and they were in court for 4 years. I mean, I give Uber and Lyft credit. They didn't fold, but somewhere something happened.
They knew this was coming, though, at some point. I mean, well, maybe not this, but they knew something was coming.
Well, there was a moment when it came as a surprise, my guess is, because nobody expected 175 million. That would be my guess. Right. You don't roll that kind of dice in a corporation.
I mean, to put that into perspective, it was $208 million that was raised by the Flex Association, which was DoorDash, Uber, Postmates, Instacart, everybody, to fight for Prop 22 in California on a ballot initiative. And that was the most California had ever seen, $208 million.
Right.
And so just to put it in perspective, the largest state with the most GDP and people, they had to put in $208 million there. And this was just $75 million fine.
Right. So, and insiders could say you're totally wrong, and I'm freely admitting that. I'm forced to use my best business judgment. I'm an independent contractor, and I use independent contractors.
But anybody that says that Mike's wrong, we challenge you to come on this podcast.
Yeah, love to have it.
Seriously.
You could hear from
if you're watching and you think that this is wrong and you have some kind of say in that system, please come on.
Love to. Anyway, that is what happened. And all the terms are going to be defined by people who are neither independent contractors nor buyers of independent contractor services. I'm talking judges, state and federal attorneys, plaintiffs' attorneys, regulators, staffers, agency magistrates. Once in a rare circumstance, there'll be a jury. All those people are going to define every one of these terms, and each one will make a decision on pass or fail. Of all of them, it's 9 tests. Mm-hmm. Anyone kills it. It kills the goose. So with that, I think I've got a couple of memorable things to keep in your mind. 9 tests in a 3-part test.
Because mainly my view on that is, and it might just be wrong, but my view is to say 9-part test just sounds even wrong to everybody.
Right.
So of course you want to make it 3, but it's not.
And for a little amusing drive time while you're waiting for a job, you can look at what you think would actually give you a safe harbor. And not one of these is the safe harbor. You can't say, oh, if I do this, I can pass. I mean, look at the speed law. You know how to pass a speed law test. It says 20 miles an hour in the school, you go 19. You're going to pass every time. 30 miles an hour, you're going to go 29. Now, you might go 31, but you're practical and you think they're not going to arrest me for 31, etc. But what if it just said slow? What speed? What speed? The law does not encourage compliance because you can't figure out what would be compliant. And in fact, nothing is, because that's the way they want it. Nothing is compliant with this test. I rest my case.
So, yeah, and so we covered a lot. But here's a question. So this is a friend of mine, Scrabble. She lives in, her name's April. Hi, April. She lives in Georgia. And she's saying you underestimate how much these companies hold back for judgments like these in this climate.
I agree. They do hold back a tremendous amount. In announcing this to the Massachusetts market, basically, we said that the portion, Uber's portion of this, of the 175 million, I think it was 148, is 3% of their total corporate cash. That doesn't matter. I mean, they don't have to pay it until January 1st, but let me tell you, that's a corporate expense. The board wants to know about it. They want, everybody's screaming. They want to use that money for something.
Mm-hmm.
So Scrabble, I fully acknowledge that, but think of what another company where the whole company is worth $40 million, and they look at this fine and they go, that's like many times what I'm worth. How are they going to treat my, using independent contractor nurses to cover, special medicine in the rural areas? And so they're trying to scare buyers with these tactics, and so that they will withdraw from the market, and they won't have to have suits like this because everyone's terrified, and they could care less about independent contractors because they want to unionize you.
So Mike, we had a question about last week that was, wouldn't this, and I thought this was a good question. Wouldn't this stop smaller companies from even wanting to come to Massachusetts, giving Uber and Lyft the upper? That's one win they'd have out of this, because they almost monopolize immediately.
I think this will stop many smaller companies from setting up shop here or expanding here. So yes to that part of it. I think there's some reason to think that maybe Uber and Lyft think that driverless cars are coming faster than Massachusetts is thinking, and they're thinking maybe sort of just pay my fine and quietly get out of town when we have a model that passes the transportation department's okay. I mean, I'd consider that if I were doing it. I mean, they're by contract now with the Attorney General. They're promising they're going to live forever under her guidance as far as their benefits and pay structure and pay rates. That's intolerable. That means the Attorney General's in charge of their entire personnel function. So unless they're thinking of that there's an out, I don't know. See, but they're not talking about it, and I probably wouldn't either. And the state's not talking about it because they're thrilled. And Andrea Campbell's going to be a candidate for governor eventually, so she's thrilled. So the rest of us get to make up our careers in the silence.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, you get a little cynical in this business.
So here's something from Scrabble. Well, it explains why W-2 staffing agencies are big supporters of this legislation. She also added, or similar legislation, I should say.
Yeah, I would agree. The very quiet there. Both of those groups have a common interest, and in not having people have access to the market as an individual. The glory of what Uber and Lyft and all these other platforms have done is allow an individual to snap his fingers and join the free market and just work by the hour, work for an hour or two and make money, driving effectively, getting tips. So, yes.
Okay, so this is part 2 of 6. And yes, Mike already has all 6 laid out. We're not going to tell you guys the names. You're going to have to wait each week and learn as we go. I mean, I guess he already gave away next week's. But so maybe every week you'll get given away the next week's title, but we're not going any further than that.
That's okay. I mean, people want to know how this became so horrible, and because it wasn't this way before 2004, and that's a story. So we'll keep you interested. Everybody's in this. There's a cast of.
Yeah, and that's what I was trying to say in the beginning too, and I want to make sure we say it every time, is that, guys, this is not a Massachusetts piece. It is, in the fact that we're using the example, but that example could have been anywhere.
Yeah,
I mean, even look at what Minnesota and other states are doing. It's different, but it's all it all falls down these horrible chutes. It's just how bad is it,
right,
when it comes out?
Oh, there are actually worse laws than this, believe it or not. And maybe as our epilogue, we'll talk about annex appendix extra. Epilogue. That sounds like
Brian in Pittsburgh says Mike is dropping Easter eggs. So, yeah, you got to keep listening to get them all, though, guys.
Hey, this is a fascinating thing, and the thing is, we can get around it as freelancers. There are solutions, and it is, the fact is, these guys, everybody's having fun talking about it. That's a big first step. I am thrilled. But every week we're going to have something new, and then we're going to keep.
And I'll at least give you guys a little spoiler, but not too much, because I don't even know. But the part 6 is like the Star Wars episode, movie, A New Hope. Like it can be a win. All of this can come around and be good.
Right.
Not have to be bad, I guess, is the win.
Right. There is a good answer. There's a good answer. And there's solutions. Nobody has talked about it for 86 years because they don't want to. The people who control the law in Massachusetts don't want you to know anything about this. But if you know, that's what we're talking about. If you know, you'll go, oh, I see what they're missing. You can never figure out what the missing piece is until you fill in all the pieces around it. Once you've worked a jigsaw puzzle.
Yep.
That's what that stupid missing piece looks like.
Yep.
Talking about it. All right.
Okay, guys, we're in double overtime again. We probably are more like at a half hour with this thing, and give or take 5 minutes is the way I'd probably look at it. So we're just barely into overtime.
5 minutes, 6 minutes. No,
it's actually until we say it's 30 minutes. So we'll say it now. We'd actually be 12 minutes over. But thank you everybody for joining us. Again, I said it would be this week, but I've just been slammed. But next week there will be intro, outro music here too. So it's gonna be a little way to play us in and out. So you guys come back for part 3 and every week. Okay. And catch us on the live. And if not, you'll see my community post even today pointing to Be My Own Boss. So get familiar with that page, like and subscribe it. And we will see you back here next week. Thank you for joining us. And thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Steve. And thank you.